Once red-hot Edmonton Oilers have now dropped 5 in a row. Hernan Salas of Locked On Oilers joins us to discuss what the Oilers can do to turn this slump around.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Gil Martin, so glad to be with you, and thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome in Hernan Salas of Locked On Oilers. The Oilers going through a bit of a rough time right now, dropping their last 5, most of those games at home. Hernan, what's been the difference between this team that was so red hot up until a week or so ago and now 5 in a row?
Yeah, well, where do I start here, Gil? It's a lot of things going wrong for this team. The biggest one for me is the special teams has dried up. And the special teams was winning them games earlier on the season, maybe when they weren't at their best, but they're getting 3 power plays and they're scoring 3 power play goals. So they were kind of outscoring their mistakes, their bad starts. But lately, it's been a little bit of everything. Always a soft goal against. You're not getting anything 5-on-5 from any of the lines. And the special teams, I think the PK has given up a goal here in every game on the homestand. The power play, they got 2 against Boston, but they've been shut out in all the other games on the homestand as well. So it's a combination of a lot of things here in Edmonton. I mean, the one excuse that I will throw out there is they took a lot of injuries to their back end, and that hampered them a bit. But they won a couple games with a very raw group there. Now the only guy that's out is Duncan Keith, who's a regular. Chris Russell's also out, but he's been kind of in and out when everybody's healthy. So that excuse was good maybe a couple games ago, but not anymore. And the fans are getting antsy here. I work on the post-game shows here as well, and people are getting pretty fired up. There's even a lot of people talking about the GM and the coach letting them go. So it's getting bad here in Edmonton when you lose 5 straight. And I'll say this, the Edmonton Oilers, maybe that start was a little misleading, but I still don't think they're as bad as of what we've seen here in the last 5 games. They played really well against Boston, probably deserve better, but in this town, after the decade of darkness and everything the fans have been through, moral victories are no longer accepted here. So this team needs to find a way here to turn it around. So it's a hard job for Dave Tippett to do because there's not a lot of options. I mean, there's 2 guys sitting out in Turris and Benson that are not going to move the needle. There's no one in the American League that's going to come up here and move the needle. So he's got to find it within here, the group he has.
Do you feel, I mean, this team thrives mostly on its offense. Do you feel the goaltending and defense on this team is good enough to compete with the best teams in the division?
Well, the goaltending it started well. Like, you're getting quality starts. And Mike Smith got hurt early on. There's news today that he might be ready to go this week, which is big. Koskinen started really well, and his record was really good. At one point he only had 1 loss after like 10 games or something like that. But he's tailed off a bit. Stuart Skinner's giving you a couple good games. He's just not winning a lot of them. The team's not really putting up a lot of goals when he's in the net. So I thought it was a risk bringing Koskinen and Smith back for a 3rd year. It started well. I was kind of taking it on the chin. People saying, "See, they'll be fine," but when you have a 39-year-old goalie and he gets hurt, it's going to take time. And that's what's happened with Mike Smith. Like, he hasn't been able to get healthy here. It's almost been 2 months. And Mikko Koskinen is Mikko Koskinen. He's a backup goaltender. He's not a number 1 guy. He'll give you 1-2 good games and then he falls off. And the bad thing with Mikko is, like, he's always giving up 1 bad goal a game. And I'm not going to put it all on the goaltending. The team in front of them has to be better. And defensively, I mean, they started really well. Like, Cody Ceci's been surprisingly very good here. Darnell Nurse is not playing at the level he was last year, but he's your number 1 guy. He missed 2 weeks. And then they brought in a guy named Marcus Nemelainen from the minors, and he's been kind of a pleasant surprise. He throws a lot of hits. He's a stay-at-home guy. He's not the sexiest guy to watch, but it seems like the coaching staff really likes him. It looks like he's going to be here to stay. So, I mean, defensively, yeah, you need to be better. Bouchard's struggling a bit. Tyson Berry is a whipping boy here for sure. People are really hard on him because he's not the best in his own end. So, like I said, there's so many things going wrong with this team right now. It's just it's hard to just point at that. And I'll say this: the biggest problem They gave up the first goal almost in every game.
Right.
They've played 26 games this year so far. They've given up the first goal 17 times.
17 then you're
times.
Always starting from behind.
So from November 1st up until last night's game, they've given up the first goal 14 times. Every game on this homestand, they've given up the first goal. So this team's always chasing the game. And then Dave Tippett goes away from his lines and he puts McDavid and Draisaitl together because it's the only thing he can do. And then they're always going to create. They're a little snake bitten right now, but then you get nothing from the other lines. So it's just a bad situation right now. The Oilers can't seem to get that first goal.
You know, this team renowned for its offense. You mentioned some of the names, Draisaitl, McDavid, you have Nugent Hopkins, Zach Hyman. And yet, over the 5-game losing streak, 8 goals in 5 games, you know, three games with just 1 goal. What has, besides the power play, what short-circuited this offense with all the talent that they have?
Yeah, well, coming in, I mean, up until yesterday, Nugent Hopkins only had 2 goals. And he plays in every situation, so he's got to produce more. I'm not saying he's playing bad, but he has to produce more. Yamamoto as well. He's a smaller guy. I think he had a really hot stretch back in 2020, right before COVID hit, with Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, and I thought I'll include myself. We all thought this guy was going to really be that 20-goal scorer. I just don't think Yamamoto's that player. He's really good two-way guy. He kills penalties for the Oilers, but he's just not a natural goal scorer. Jesse Puljujarvi's hot and cold, and then Zach Hyman, who's been an absolute beast for this team. He left the game yesterday. He looked hurt. We'll find out more news on him tomorrow. But it's just, they're just not scoring. I don't know what it is. 5-on-5, they're not generating a lot. Your third line is not giving you anything. Fourth line barely plays, Gil, because they're always chasing the game. So the fourth line is just sitting there for stretches because they're like, well, we need a goal here. You're not going to throw them out there. So it's been tough. And I wish I could point at what the issue is. Now, Dave Tippett's stuck with his guns. He hasn't made any lineup changes. He's gone with the same lines here on this homestand. Some people are like, well, why don't we freshen it up? Try Fogle in the top 6. Maybe take Yamamoto out. But he starts most games with Draisaitl and McDavid on separate lines, which in my opinion, I think is better. But then by the second period, because you're down 1 or 2 goals, they go back together, and then it's just a mishmash of lines after them, and that doesn't really generate a lot of offense. So it's I wish I could tell you, because I'd call up Dave Tippett and be like, hey, do this to score some goals. But it is because at 3 straight losses, at 4 straight losses, we're like, hey, you know what? Every team goes through this. Like, let's just pump the brakes. It's just a rough patch. But yesterday's game, they weren't terrible. They played all right. They had a push, but there's just something missing with this team, and I don't know what it is. They don't play with a lot of physicality. They're just and like I said, they're always playing from behind, and that just gets so exhausting for these guys. And McDavid and Draisaitl are playing so much because Dave Tippett, that's his go-to. It's like, well, we need a goal. We need to tie this game, and so those guys are playing a ton of minutes. And right now, I mean, I don't think anyone here in Edmonton has the answers to why this team can't win right now.
Is there a player either in the AHL or on the bench who could provide that physicality? Or,
well, the 2 guys that are sitting out are Tyler Benson, and Kyle Turris. And no, like, Kyle Turris just doesn't have it anymore. Like, it's tough. He's here, but he's gone after this year. And Tyler Benson's a young guy who's a skilled guy, but he's not going to play in the top 6 here in Edmonton. So when he's in, I appreciate that he's trying to be physical and muck it up and get in other guys' faces, but it's like he's trying to become that player so he can play more. So those are the only 2 guys that we have here in Edmonton that are sitting out. And then in the minors, I don't know, to be honest with you. Like, you look at a guy like Seth Griffiths, is he going to come up and provide that? And I think the Oilers do have it, though. Like, Darnell Nurse, sure, he needs to be more physical. Zach Kassian, like, talk about a guy that's just falling off here, because he started well the season. He was back to his old self. He was mucking it up. He was getting in the other team's face. He was annoying them. And then something happened. He got hurt, and then he got bumped to the first line, had a couple good games, and then now he's just like, there's no interest there, it seems like, to make a hit or anything like that. So, like, I brought up Marcus Namalanian, a guy who's playing his 5th, 6th game. He had 10 hits yesterday to lead the Oilers, and he's the only one that brings that physical element, because the Oilers right now are just too easy to play against.
Hernan, why don't you tell our listeners where they could find your podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Hernan the Man and at Locked On Oilers as well. And yeah, check Locked On Oilers Monday to Friday. Usually post my pod around early afternoon, so check it out there. And I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about tomorrow as we continue to try to fix the Edmonton Oilers, and hopefully they can get back to their winning ways here.
Yeah, hopefully they can turn it around. So glad we finally got to do this. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you.
All right, this episode is brought to you by your friends at Built Bar. This holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or even better than a candy bar. That's Built Bar, filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazingly low in calorie, sugar, net carbs, and fat, and high in protein. You get the best of both worlds, delicious and healthy. And they've got so many flavors, you'll have a hard time choosing. Will you have raspberry or mint brownie, cherry or double chocolate, cookies and cream, or peanut butter brownie? Built Bar gives you that extra fuel you need to bust down those mall doors and battle all the holiday shoppers. Or if you're just standing in endless shopping lines, Built Bar can give you that extra something to keep you going. So throw one in your jacket or purse. You never know when you're going to need it. You're friends with Santa? Well, tell Santa to throw a few Built Bars in those stockings. With so many flavors, they'd make anyone's Christmas morning a happy one. Want to cozy up with something warm? Here's a holiday secret. Dip your Built Bar into a piping hot cup of cocoa, let it melt a little, and give your beverage a bit of that Built Bar flavor. Plus, you'll have a nice melty Built Bar to go with it, and be sure to have a couple of napkins on hand. Like some of those marshmallowy treats around the holidays, you need to get your hands on Built Bar Puffs. They're light, fluffy, and marshmallowy through and through. Different flavors, all covered in chocolate. Taste so good, you won't believe they're filled with protein. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com.